All right, Survivor Indianapolis Advantage Island episode 4 is over, so let's go ahead and get into the breakdown, the recap for episode 4. So we have our tribe swap, we have a new challenge where one person gets kicked out of the challenge before it even starts, and we have uh, a kingpin type player get voted off here in Mason. So let's start off with the challenge. We're going to skip over the tribe swap because that's going to be a big part of talking about Mason in general.
Right.
So this challenge, we tweaked this a ton behind the scenes in our testing. So talk about like Alex, your thoughts on the challenge now that we've seen it um through the game, like it happened in a real game instead of just being in testing. Is there anything else that you would tweak about it, or do you think it's like overall pretty good?
No, I think it was a pretty good challenge. I will say this. It's really hard to toss a beanbag from a badminton rack onto these little tables. And the tables aren't that big. They slide pretty easily. And as you guys saw in our testing that we used for the example video, I probably missed it at least 5 times in just that little video. And I shortened that when I edited it. So you're talking about it takes a little bit of time. And you saw how long it took Chris to finally get the hang of it. But once you figure it out, it's not too difficult. I felt like people did a pretty good job of utilizing the badminton rackets and passing the beanbags. I will say the only thing I didn't love was how we saw how easy it was for Annie to drop it off to Mason in between there. And maybe if we would have spread them out a little bit more so it was more of a tossing challenge instead of a so close together, that kind of thing. That would be the only tweak I would make. But overall, I really enjoyed this challenge.
Yeah, I definitely agree. There was a little bit of miscommunication on my part that led to the middle section. So the person after the first balance beam, like in between the two balance beams, that person was too close. There should have been more, like it should have been like I think double the space there. And to me it was like, well, I didn't notice it right away. I actually I did notice it before we started, but it was
Mhm.
like we're trying to go, we're on a schedule. Let's just go ahead and we'll see what happens. And as long as it's even for both teams, it's like it's fine. So yes, it was a little bit too close. On that section, I think we could definitely make that harder. We could probably make multiple parts of it further apart, except for the end. Again, we're worried about the schedule a lot, so we're trying really hard to not push the limits too much. It's also hard to know, like when we tested it, you're talking about how hard it was for you. It didn't seem like it was nearly as hard for you as it ended up being for Drew and Mason. And I
Yeah.
don't say that to be disparaging of them. They're both very athletic guys, in much better shape than I am, and did a really good job in the
And me.
challenges. Yeah, it did really good in the challenges. This is not a matter of like athleticism. This is a matter of like, can you adjust these small adjustments in these tosses in a situation like a lot of these skills and these kind of challenges, and it's the same in the real Survivor, is not so much about experience. It's more about flexibility, and I don't mean like physically. I mean in the moment. Can you like make small adjustments and figure out what you need to do with your body in ways that like in areas of your life that you've not done before? Like how many of us have high experience with badminton rackets? Probably almost nobody. And those that do don't have experience with that badminton rackets and bean bags. So like it's just a matter of taking that on in the moment, on the day of, and then making adjustments and being able to figure that out. And that's just not something that you can predict when
Mhm.
you're testing these challenges out. So I feel like overall, like you said, I thought it worked really well. Um, for in terms of in this game specifically, I think the only thing I would say that the new Shibwe tribe should have done differently was maybe swap out sooner from Drew to Mason, and then maybe Mason should have swapped out. I don't know because it did take Chris a little while, but once he got one, it was literally the next two were back to back. He had three throws in a row land. And I think that if I had to guess, I would guess that Mason and Drew collectively got up more shots than Chris did on his own. I could be wrong, but based off of my editing of the episode and then your editing of the episode, that was just kind of my perception.
Mhm.
But other than that, it was like I don't know what else you do. Chris just figured it out faster, and that's the kind of thing where it's like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
well, we like you got beat.
Well, one thing I want to add too, and this is just for me, when we had tested the challenge out originally, you were the runner and you were getting the beanbags for me. I was staying in one spot stationary where
That's
in
true.
the game we allowed them not to use the runner as the only person that could get the beanbag when it dropped. So the player that was shooting was then leaving to retrieve their beanbag and rebound and then come back and shoot. So I do think
which is
that
harder.
it's harder because they don't get the adjustment of like, okay, how do I need to throw this? They're a little bit more exhausted because they had to go and get it. And it's one time you do it, but when you do it like 7, 8 times in a row, now you're really getting tired of back and forth, back and forth. So maybe if they would have utilized their runner, that was the first
Sure,
person at the beginning of the line to rebound for them, I think they might have been able to catch on a little bit quicker. So I do think that was one downfall. It worked for
sure,
Chris. He didn't have to have Cameron do it for him, but I think for Mason and Drew, it probably would have helped them get a little bit more of an adjustment on that throw of, oh, here's where I need to take some off or throw a little bit harder here because they would have been in the same stationary position versus constantly moving back and forth.
that's a really good point. I'm glad that you noticed that. I didn't think about that. It's definitely something that I feel like that would make it easier for them if they don't have to move. So, any other thoughts on the challenge before we move into the tribe swap and Advantage Island?
Yeah. Well, I do know that this is the previous
Mm.
episode. We told them there was going to be an advantage hidden
Yeah, we
in the
told
challenge.
Eli and Cameron
Right. And so
from Advantage
I,
Island.
I think that it did add a little bit more of a fun element to it, being able to put an actual idol or an advantage, I should say. We don't know if it's an idol or not, but an advantage
Mm.
into the game, right?
Yeah, well, we find out later in the episode, Adrian got an idol from the challenge,
Mm-hmm.
and Eli got a steal a vote.
Steal a
I think
vote.
it was a steal a vote. It was a steal a vote. I remember because I am currently working on editing the episode where he plays the steal a vote. So
Okay.
spoiler alert. So
Does he
yes,
play it
steal a vote.
or does he not? We'll see.
Mm.
But no, and I think that's interesting too. And it does kind of lead into our tribe swap here because two different people are in different tribes. They have the information. What happens in this tribe swap here? How will they utilize this information? Who knows this information? Is it just the two guys that went out there? Did they tell their tribe mates stuff like that? That's what makes this really interesting because if anybody else has any idea that these advantages are out there, how did they get them? So it feels like every time anybody goes to Advantage Island, they want to come back and spread the gospel, share the news, and it's like nobody wants to keep anything close to the
A
chest.
secret, yeah. Definitely came into play here because Adrian should not have known that there was. If I'll say it this way, if Eli and Cameron neither one had said anything to anybody else, then Adrian would not have known it was there. It was hidden in a way that she would not have been able to obviously see it. So if she got it, it was because either she saw Eli or Cameron going for one on the other side, and then she got that one, or it was because someone told her about it. Because what ended up happening was that on the tribe swap, Eli and Cameron, which were on opposite tribes, ended up unfortunately for them on the same tribe. So then only one of them could have gone for the advantage on the new Siakam's side of the challenge.
Mm,
So that kind of just limited their ability to gather both the advantages. And unfortunately for them, they're on the side with the weaker advantage based off of prior teams winning Advantage Island. I basically, behind the scenes, pulled the curtain back a little bit. In order to balance it out a little bit, I didn't want it to be like an idol every time. You have a chance to win an idol every single time. So if that tribe had already earned an idol, I would give them the opportunity to earn a less powerful advantage. I would
mm,
go down the chain getting less and less powerful with every advantage that was put into the game. And eventually, we did have a potential in the game, in like the script of the game, the plan for the day, to say, "Sorry, you can't get anything because your tribe currently has all these advantages and no one's playing them." So
mm,
if that was definitely something we talked about. So we were trying to be very careful with the power balance of all of that stuff and try not to, have someone have this crazy advantage get in where a bunch of things are being played and it gets all wonky. So, because of all of that hindsight, we put it, or I guess it's foresight, we put into all of that. Um, Eli and Cameron could not get an idol; they can only get a steal a vote because they were on the side with the steal a vote. And I don't know. I haven't talked. I don't know. Maybe you have. I haven't talked to anybody that told me how Adrian knew it was there. But based off of what happened in the past and what happens in the future, it's probably just a matter of loose lips, right?
mhm. Yeah, because everybody wants to know what happened at Advantage Island,
And
and
they tell them
it just,
everything.
yeah, everybody just told everything, and I think they were afraid of lying and getting caught in the lie, and so
Sure.
I mean, if you got bad liars playing the game, it's not going to work out in their favor. But like, what are you going to say? Or if you tell somebody and somebody else tells somebody, like, word can travel fast when you whisper something to somebody. If you trust somebody that maybe doesn't fully have your trust, they could trust somebody else more on their team, and you get into a tribe swap and things like
Mm,
that. So now you're like, oh shoot, well they told me it was going to be here in the game. Maybe it'll see if it's on my side now. So I definitely think that there was probably just some talking that maybe they should have been a little bit better at keeping it a secret, because especially if they're Cameron and Eli are brothers, right? Working together would make a lot of sense, but why not just keep that to yourselves and be able
hmm
to further yourself into the game by knowing that information instead of telling people? But at the same time, they could have been kind of vague about it and just said, yeah, it's supposed to be hidden in the challenge, didn't say where, and the people were looking for it. So that could have been another
Yeah.
thing too.
Since we're on the topic of Advantage Island, we had Leah there this week trying to solve the classic Survivor five-piece puzzle. If you are a big fan of the show, you've definitely seen this puzzle in play a couple times. You may have even seen Spencer in Second Chances solve it in like 3.5 seconds because he had memorized that puzzle, which it's 5 pieces. So like
Yeah.
it's just it isn't like he's a genius. It's 5 pieces. I mean, he's a smart guy, but like
Yeah,
5 pieces,
he
it's
thinks
five
he's a
pieces.
genius.
He thinks he's a genius. He's probably smart, I'm sure he is,
Yeah.
but he's a little odd now. Don't look too deep into his stuff.
Yeah.
For this game though, um, yeah, Leah, she was really close a few times, I thought. And maybe if she had, 5 more minutes, maybe she would have
Yeah.
gotten it because there was once where I think she needed to swap 2 pieces. I have to go back and look at it again, but there's one spot where I think if she had swapped 2 pieces, she would have gotten it. But she didn't need it, so
Yeah, she didn't need it. That worked out in her favor. And I also think that she she could you could tell she really was getting she was starting to figure it out, but it was just like
mhm,
running out of time.
sure,
And we basically gave her from the start of the challenge until the challenge was finished. So the timer at the top, what we obviously had it sped up a little bit, but it was not just about a minute. It was a little bit longer than that. And it was kind of like watching the challenge. I told her to go once the challenge started.
yeah,
And once the players had started that challenge, that's when she was able to go. And then once you said Siakam wins immunity, I told her, okay, you got to stop. And that's how we kind of adjusted the time. So if anybody's wondering, it wasn't like a 5 minute timer to get it done. It was basically the length of the challenge. She had that
yeah,
entire time to do it. So,
yeah.
yeah. And I think maybe I should have let her start before you guys had actually started that challenge, but I still feel like we gave her plenty of time to do it.
Yeah, I told you at some point afterward, I wouldn't have cared if you had let her start before, or if
Mm,
you'd even let her keep going until I got there for a few more minutes.
yeah.
I don't know if that would have mattered. It maybe would have, maybe wouldn't have. At the end of the day, she didn't need immunity here. And ultimately, I put you in that position to be in charge and make that call, and I'm fine with that as the person that's running the whole thing. And really, any of the players should be fine with that as well. Um, they understood the rules going in. You were clear, like this is the rules, this is what's gonna happen, so here you go for it. And honestly,
Yeah.
it's like as long as the rules are clear and they're not like unfair, meaning somebody else got a different like if you had and like if the next round we done the same thing and had somebody else there and we gave them like double the time, then obviously that would be stupid. But I think it's totally fine the way that it was,
Yeah.
and it didn't change the game either way.
No, I mean,
So
and I
it,
will say,
it,
I
it may
did
have
like
helped her
it,
to
it
not
might
have
have.
the threat of winning a challenge. I
True.
don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So just remind me, because all she was going to do was get immunity, right? If she won, right? So she would
Yes.
have been immune from being voted out in the next or in that tribal
Just it
council.
was a 1 round immunity, the same way that like
Yeah.
in this challenge, the way same way like the whole new Siakam tribe has immunity, right? So it would have
Yeah.
been an individual immunity the same way that individual immunity works in the future of this game.
For sure. And I
Um,
and I did like how we did the tribe swap. I thought it was a very fun twist.
yeah,
11 players, one player gets kicked to Advantage Island. It kind of feels a lot like Exile Island back in the day, if you remember that, when they do the tribe swap and send someone to Exile
send them into
Island.
exile. Yeah,
You're not getting punished, obviously, because you can't really punish somebody and make them sit over under a tree for an hour. Like, we're not going to do that. We don't have the time to do that for this game. So, pulling them aside and making them earn their advantage potentially with the theme of our game, I thought was a very fun twist
sure.
as well.
And I will say I've just actually just thought of this, and I don't know how. It seems like a pretty obvious thing to be a benefit of how we did this. It almost like feels like it should have been a part of our intention of why we did it in the first place, but it definitely was not. Not for me at least. I
Yeah.
loved that this round, Advantage Island did not take the player away from the game during the strategy time of the game. So the player did not miss any time with strategy. She was back. She did a confessional, and so she may have missed a minute or two, like max, because she did a confessional after this, and then she went out. But like, it would be no different than if we pulled her first to get to have a confessional after the challenge. So really, she missed no time talking with the tribe. Whereas people before, we had Chris and Eli last round, and then Anna and Bailey. They all four missed time with their tribe members. And for some of those people, and obviously Drew and who else was when they were safe?
Right.
Drew and Moretta when they were safe. And so for Anna and Bailey, you can make the case that that had some impact on their game. It could have been a part of why they were voted off, if not a big part of it. Um, so I liked that this one did not do that, and I don't think if I was Leah, and I would say that she should say that's not why she was safe. I don't think that, like, I think if she had missed 5 minutes with her tribe, she still would have been okay.
Hmm.
Because she had worked hard to be in a position of power and to have a strong alliance around her. And so I don't think I think that's why it didn't matter. But I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that, like, the idea was better, I think, in this format where you're not missing time with the tribe, you're missing a challenge.
Yeah, and I will say that I think the right tribe lost for Leah to join because she had the numbers when
Sure,
she joined,
sure.
right? And I think that's a big point because it was 3-2 Siakam, and then she joined when she was from the original Siakam tribe. So now it's 4-2 to the
Hmm.
Shibwe tribe. So it's like, okay, she's got the numbers with her people, but had she gone to the other tribe, it would have been 3-3.
Well, it would
And
have been 3-3, and maybe she could have pulled Chris.
yeah, maybe
Maybe,
it just depends
maybe
on how, because Chris was kind of all over the place with his voting. So
he was.
so
He
who
was.
knows? And at this point, I mean, you hear Neil clearly say it in the video, like, I'm Siakam strong, I'm Red strong all the
Yeah,
way. And so if
all
Chris
the way.
hears that, if Chris hears that, right, is he gonna just give right into that and say, I want to join that group? Or is he gonna stay with someone he's voted for previously in Cameron and someone else, Sonya,
Yeah,
who also has relations with Neil? But at the same point,
but
it would have been
sorry. Go
interesting
ahead.
then. Well, it just would have been funny because then you'd
Sure.
have two married couples and brothers on the
And
same
brothers
tribe.
on the same tribe. It would have been
I was
amazing. But
I was kind
I
of
think
rooting for that.
I think either way though, Leah's. I mean, this is all theoretical now, so we're kind of a little bit
Yeah,
off
sorry.
track. But it's not your fault. It's fine. But like my point, I guess, to close up to kind of put a cap on it here is that I think Leah's safe either way, because even if Chris is like, no, I'm not voting for one of my original tribe members, we're voting for a Siakam. Leah says, okay, sure. And that person wouldn't be the person that they vote for, wouldn't be Leah. It would be Neil or
Yeah,
who else is there?
Eli.
Eli. So like it would have been Neil or Eli, uh, not her. So I
I
think that,
mean,
like, because Chris needs her. If Chris
yeah,
is going to, he needs somebody to flip if he's going to vote off a Siakam in this theoretical universe. Where she goes over there. So who would he want to work with to bring over? But his wife, like, it probably would be the person that he would be like, yeah, hey, let's work together.
yeah.
Let's get rid of Eli or Neil, and he probably would
And
let her pick even. I don't know, but
I mean, and at this
it's,
point,
it's interesting.
we know Eli had to steal a vote too. So
Yes, that's true. That could have impacted
he
things a
could
little
have
bit.
stolen one of the votes from them
Make
and
it
said,
make
"Okay,
it
we're
three.
keeping Siakam strong. Sorry, Chris, you're on the out. You got to go."
Yeah,
And maybe Cameron would have flipped with his brother just because Cameron had gotten two votes already, and he thought
from
after the
Chris.
first one that it was Sonya. I mean, who knows who he thinks was going for him? It
Yeah,
could have went for somebody else. I mean, there's a lot of different
there's a lot of
scenarios that could have opened up
possibilities.
here had things gone differently. But I think for Leah's case and for a lot of the people on Siakam, it was a nice move for Leah. They could have almost thrown the challenge to keep their tribe strong, which we didn't talk about that either as another possibility. Say, hey, Mason and Moretta by themselves, hey, let's throw this challenge, get these two out. We got the numbers. That could have been smart.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't think Drew did that. But definitely would have been an interesting strategy.
Hmm.
So let's go ahead and, I guess, dive into that with Mason and the tribe swap here.
Yeah.
You have Mason and Moretta. You have two players that um feel like they're on the outside looking in, and they have a vote together. Moretta, I was surprised on the rewatch, even though I was the person videoing that. So I should have remembered that when I edited it. I was like, oh, she voted with Mason.
Yeah.
I assumed that Drew voted with Mason, or that it was 5-4-1, or 5-1, yeah. But it was not. It was 4-2, and Morena stayed with Mason. And had forgotten that since editing it. And when I rewatched it to prepare for this podcast, I was like, oh, Morena voted with Mason. So What do you think separated Moretta from Mason in terms of why they picked Mason and not Moretta to vote for? Because it could have been either one of them.
Yeah, I think Mason probably stood out a little bit more in challenges. Moretta went to Advantage Island and lost. She did win the puzzle, but I think that Moretta and Sonya had very good chemistry that kind of got them an advantage in that challenge with the toilet paper rolls and or the paper towel rolls and the tennis ball. So just I think Mason felt like more of a physical threat than Moretta, and I think Moretta had more connections with the rest of the tribe as well in terms of people she already kind of knew outside of the game with Leah and with Adrian and that group. So I think it just made sense to kind of target Mason, but I think she would have been the next one up had they, uh,
If they lose again.
lost lose the next challenge in the future. So she could be the next one up at this point. But
Yeah.
I just think that with Mason, such a threat, and we kind of saw how he was controlling the game for
Yeah.
Shibwe, and you see it where
The
you
beginning
talked
of the
about
episode.
getting Moretta to flip on Seth was what kind of got that blind side rolling. So Moretta was now working with Mason, and it was Mason was kind of the ringleader. So he loses all this power in this tribe swap, and it kind of makes him the de facto target number one.
Yeah, and this is why anyone that's watching this that has played before or wants to play, or has played before and wants to play again, or has not played and wants to play, Mason was like a ringleader, kingpin power player in the pre-merge, and it got him voted off in a swap. And that's kind of what happens a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
I understand why he did it because he's one of the few people that like know the game. So he was usually the one that was like starting the whole like, "Hey guys, let's all split up and make small talk and have conversations and strategize." But because he probably should have some multiple different points, let somebody else make the call. And I know that both Cameron and Sonya are trying, either intentionally trying or just happening, that they are playing more of a back seat. And Moretta did the same thing with when Mason came to her at the last second and said, "Hey, we're all voting for Seth. Are you in or are you out?" And she's like, "Yeah, okay, I'm in. Let's go."
Yeah.
And you see her kind of talk to that, speak to that at the beginning of the episode. But like that gets you voted out when you are the one that you are the reason why, these people have gone home is you have rallied the votes, you have made connections, you have even with he kind of got Seth in on the vote to get out Anna, he got Moretta in on the vote to get out Seth, and I think the vote to get out Seth last week was a mistake by Mason. I think he should have gone for Chris. We talked about it a little bit last time, but I think that was a mistake and it cost him the game to some extent, but also just not even just because he needed to vote off Chris, but because Seth was an ally.
Mm-hmm.
I think more so than Moretta. He hadn't hardly worked with Moretta, hadn't talked to Moretta. Moretta in confessionals, both last episode and this episode, said she wanted to vote off Chris. And I don't think Mason even knew that she wanted to vote off Chris. He just
Mm-hmm.
went to her last second and said, "Hey, this is what's happening. Are you in or are you out?" So Miranda is doing a better job making connections in the social aspect of the game, and Mason is doing a better job of the strategic and the physical sides of the game. But the problem is those two things stand out a lot more and are a lot more flashy, especially in the pre-merge. So when you get in a swap, it's like, well, this person's been running the show over there, and Moretta is just kind of like here. So why should we get rid of Moretta? Maybe later we'll get rid of Moretta if we lose again, but like Mason's a threat. Um, so we know Drew has an idol. Do you think Drew even thought about playing the idol for Mason or for somebody else? He votes for Mason, so I would assume not
Yeah.
really.
No, I think at this point he felt pretty good. It was 4-2 Siakam.
He voiced some concern about the guy-girl split. So that's why
Yeah.
I'm asking. And I don't know if that was a little bit of a play, like he was like saying that to Mason to make him feel comfortable or what.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I think he was just talking out loud, just trying to give some like honest, because he said he can't lie,
Sure,
and I kind of believe him the way he's played this game so far.
that's true.
Maybe he was just like foreshadowing for what could happen later,
Sure.
in the game as well, because he knows if he loses another guy, like okay, now it's me and a bunch of girls, and does this make our tribal maybe a little bit weaker, going up against
Hmm.
Neil and Chris and Eli, who now have a tribe of basically four guys and a girl. So maybe he was thinking like, is this the best decision for our tribe? But at the same time, I think he knew that he was pretty much outnumbered in what the other girls would do. So I think he was kind of hinting at things, but didn't really want to go full in and say, whatever. It's pretty much anybody but me at this point for Drew.
Yeah.
And if it's, hey, we'll have to risk Mason at this point, and I still have my idol in my back pocket, it's a win-win for me.
So to try to bring this to a close and kind of dovetail a couple of these conversations we have together. Yeah, you can compare Mason and Drew here really easily. So Mason's in a situation where he's a little bit nervous maybe about this guy-girl split, but he realizes, rightly so, he cannot save Mason here. If he plays the idol to save Mason and votes off one of the girls, that's a huge move that draws so much attention to him. And he's going to be voted off so quickly if he does something that as flashy as that. Even if he's confident, the way that Mason says that they have Moretta. So they have Moretta, okay, maybe they do, maybe they don't. But if he trusts that, and even if he's right, let's just pretend like Moretta is a hypothetical scenario. He plays the idol to save Mason because it's a 3-3 split or whatever. I don't even know. Like at that point, it's like, do you really think it's gonna be a 3-3 split? Is Moretta with you? Is Moretta not with you? Like you don't even know because you haven't worked with Moretta at all. So you're having to trust Mason that Moretta is correct, and then it's a 3-3 split. So then you feel like you're wasting your idol to some extent because you're only one vote away. It feels like you're so close. So
Hmm.
he plays the idol for Mason and votes off one of his allies that he's been working with all game long, that he's had a good connection with, that he has had no reason to distrust other than potential for a guy girl split. And then what happens next is that, if they lose again, then they have the control, I guess, sure. But then at the merge, what happens, right? You've shown Neil that you're not loyal to Siakam. You voted off Siakam players. Is Neil going to stay with you now? Is Neil going to have your back? And now Sheboy probably has the numbers because you've been voting off Siakam people. And you've kept
Yep.
Moretta and Mason around. So you have Moretta and Mason with Chris and Cameron from the other side. You have four or five. Am I missing somebody? Oh, Sonya. So
Yeah.
you have five Siakam players in
Well,
here. It's
Sonya was
like
Shibwe. Sonya was Shibwe.
I meant Sheba. Yeah, if you'd have because you would have kept Mason and Retta from your side of things, and
Yep.
then the other side would have Sonya,
Agreed.
Cameron, and Chris. So it'd
Yep.
be five. So you're keeping all these Sheba people, hoping they take you in. And are they taking you to the end? Are they not going to see you as a threat? So like Cameron, gosh, to me, Drew makes 100% the right choice to not play the idol,
Right.
and Mason. It seems like afterwards he was like, yeah, the swap kind of messed me up, and I think he's right to feel that way. But in the game and in his talks with people, it seemed like he was like calm, cool, and collected. And it was like, well, if I have you, Drew, I have Moretta, and we're good. And I'm like, it's 3-3. How are you good? Like,
Yeah.
and they talk about getting Annie maybe or getting somebody else, and I'm like, I don't know why you think like I understand you gotta try something, and maybe he genuinely didn't feel that good, but he felt like he needed to play it cool in order to like not seem too flustered. But I think he needed to play a little bit more. First of all, he should have played a little bit quieter early. And I don't mean like just not talk. I mean just like let other people make decisions, make calls. It seemed like he
Exactly.
wanted what he wanted to have happen happened every time. And so if you're always in control, people are gonna like, oh, he has all this power and all this control over the game. He's a big threat, whatever, whatever. That
Hmm.
should have happened first. But in this round, he should have been doing everything he could to swap people, to flip people, to, fake an idol. I mean, do whatever you got to do, try to stay alive.
Yeah.
And I felt like he played it more calm.
He did play a little too calm at this point in the game. He should have been the most aggressive now, knowing that, especially if he felt like his name was on the chopping block, especially over Moretta. If he felt like they're going to come for me, he should have been like, "Hey, Drew, look, after I'm gone and Moretta's gone, who's next? You're next, okay? We really got to work together. Let's make this happen." But at the same time, I never felt like Drew was going to waver just because of how strong original Siakam was. They were like, we're not
Hmm.
breaking this tribe up. It was very much like Borneo Survivor. Like that's what it
Yeah,
felt like
yeah,
with this group. It felt like the original Survivor of how these guys were playing, which is fair because a lot of them never have seen the game, and that's how a lot of people were for the first Survivor. It was all new to them. So
yeah,
I think that it was a smart move by Drew. Keep the idol, save it for yourself for later. Both Drew and Mason are probably some of our most knowledgeable Survivor watchers that played in this game as well too.
sure.
So I just felt like they didn't do a great job of communicating possible scenarios that could have happened. And they didn't really play it out a lot. And I think Mason was more so just probably more familiar with the new era of Survivor where you really haven't seen a lot of tribe swaps. I think we've seen one in the new era, which is like the last 6 seasons, right? So, and when you kind of have that wrinkle thrown into the game, it kind of can be a screw job for you, especially if you feel like you're in control. So, the relationship and the social part of it is very, very important. And I just don't think Mason really completely grasped what he needed to do there. And I think in hindsight, maybe he were to play again, he would handle it a little bit differently. But in the moment, you're trying to stay somewhat low because even when Mason was kind of in control of his tribe, right? It wasn't more like, hey, we're doing this, listen to me. It was more so let's kind of talk about it, but I'm going to tell you what we're going to do instead of you telling me, like you said. And
Yeah,
had he maybe went with like a Moretta plan or a Seth plan or a Sonya plan, nobody really wanted to make a definitive decision. And it was always on Mason to kind of come up with the plan and be the mastermind. So I think it was more by default than it was by him just being so eager to do it. It felt like nobody else really wanted
yeah.
to take control. So I
Well,
think that you
that's
played
that's true, but also Cameron was hardcore wanting to vote Chris off, as was
true.
Seth that round, and he's like,
Yeah.
no, we're not doing that, and he pushed and got his way. So
Yeah.
like,
And
you can't be mad that you were a big threat when you like forced your allies to do what you wanted to do instead of doing what they wanted to do.
yeah. So anyway, I mean, tough. It's Survivor. That's part of the game,
Yeah,
right? It's just you play your cards wrong and it'll come back to bite you in the butt.
yeah. Well, okay, I think that we are just about good here for episode 4. So look forward to watching Survivor Indianapolis Advantage Island episode 5 on Sunday. We'll see you next week.
See you next week, everybody.